Hello and welcome to No, It's Crochet. Today we're going to be talking about something that's a little bit less fun than our normal shows, but super important, and that is the topic of how tariffs are going to affect our crochet crafty lifestyle. We're going to cover some things like what tariffs are to start with and how to minimize and even completely avoid paying tariffs legally, of course. So let's dive in. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about what tariffs are because frankly, I probably learned what tariffs were when I was in high school, but I was probably looking at that cute guy that was 2 rows over instead of paying 100% attention to what the heck that was when the social studies teacher was talking about it. So, here's a brief history / overview. Tariffs are basically fees that different countries, not just the US, but many countries apply to products that are manufactured by a different country and sold within their borders. So, for example, if yarn is made in China and shipped into the United States, there is going to be a tariff associated with that yarn. Tariffs have been charged by the United States since the 1700s, practically before they were even founded. So it is nothing new. It is, and there have always been, well, I don't know about always, but there have been tariffs associated with buying yarn. The only difference is that the tariffs are going up. So there always were tariffs. We just didn't know about them because they were just kind of always part of the price. And now those tariffs are being increased, so we're now more aware of it, we're more cognizant of it. And other countries charge tariffs on the United States too. So if something's made in the US and shipped to China, China charges the United States a tariff as well. So it is no different. All the countries do it. It's kind of just that, hey, if you want to sell your stuff in my country, I want to make a little money on it. Is basically what it kind of comes down to. So now I really would like to make sure that the comments section below stays non-political. So if you have an opinion on the political nature of tariffs or why they were created or who created them or who instituted them or who raised them or anything like that, your comment is going to be deleted because this is not about the political side of things. This is just about the how we can minimize and maybe avoid paying those tariffs as much as possible. Okay, now there are two things that you need to know about. One is the tariff cost, and that's going to be a percentage depending on what country something is created in. So the percentage for something created in China is going to be different than the percentage for something created in Turkey. And I use those two examples because those are two of the bigger countries that yarn is manufactured in. So the percentage of yarn made in China is going to be higher than the percentage made in Turkey. But if you're buying your yarn from a company that is based outside of the United States and they are shipping their yarn to you in the United States, not only are you going to pay that percentage, but you're also going to pay a fee to the shipping company or another kind of intermediary that's not the US government for processing those tariff fees to the US government. So let's say you're buying something from Hobie.com and you have $50 in your cart because you want to qualify for the free shipping. But in addition to the $50, there's an additional $17 charge for tariffs. And I say tariffs in air quotes because it's all lumped together. So it would seem as though you're paying 35% in tariffs, but that's not really true. Now I'm not using exact numbers. I'm just kind of keeping it generic to make it a little bit more simple. But you're not actually paying $35 in tariffs, or 35% in tariffs, I mean. There is the tariff cost, which let's say that's 20% averaged out across, the yarn that you got from Turkey, the yarn that came from China. Everything's being shipped from Denmark, but they have to pay the United States. And when they pay the United States, they have to figure out, well, you've got 3 skeins from Turkey at 7% and 3 skeins from China at 20%. So that kind of works out, and we got to break it down so that the U.S. government gets all of the money that they have been asking for. Now, because that takes some effort, there are companies that charge businesses to do this on their behalf. The business doesn't want to have to figure it out. The Hobie, they don't want to have to try and figure out on every order how much money do I have to send to the U.S. government. So what they do is they send the order to this company, who then processes that information and pays the United States government what is due. But that company's not going to do it for free. So there's an additional fee that is charged for processing those tariffs. And that fee gets put back on you, the buyer, by a company like Hobie. So Hobie says, well, I don't want to pay the extra to process this. So they combine it all into one big lump sum, and it looks like you're paying a 35% tariff fee, when in fact that's split between the percentage for tariffs and the processing fee. Now let's talk about some ways that we can minimize the effect of tariffs on our yarn purchases. So there's a couple of things that we can do. First of all, we want to purchase from companies that are based in the United States. And while the yarn that you're buying may have been manufactured from somebody else, that fee to process the tariff that we talked about has already been mitigated and kind of spread out over larger quantities. So it's not as big of an impact for you as an individual. You're still having to pay the tariffs, and the cost of your yarn is probably going to go up over the next few months as the warehouses run out of the stock that they currently have. But overall, by buying from US-based companies, the cost of your order is going to be lower than if you buy from a company that is based outside of the United States who has to ship it into the United States. So that's sort of phase one, is to really buy from companies like Knit Picks or We Crochet, Knit Picks, We Crochet, Hirschner's, Premier Yarns, or buy from companies that are local to you like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. Those companies have basically already wrapped the cost of the tariffs into the yarn, and the fees for paying those tariffs is kind of spread out, and maybe they don't even have to pay them because they handle it on their own when they bring all of those things in. So the overall cost is going to be less for you. And the same is true for companies who have opted to bring a warehouse into the United States. And so there are companies like Lovecraft and Yarnspirations who, while they are not based in the United States, they have warehouses in the United States where they ship the yarn from. So again, the costs have been reduced overall and or already wrapped into the cost of your yarn. So overall, it's kind of less expensive for you. Now, if you totally want to not pay those tariffs, let's talk about some different options. And of course, these are all going to be legal. We're talking about not paying tariffs legally. We're not breaking any laws here. But there are certainly some things that we can do. The most expensive option is going to be buying yarn that is produced within the United States. And those are going to generally be cottons and linens and some wools, not acrylics. Most acrylic yarn is not going to be produced. In fact, I'm not even sure that any acrylic yarn is produced in the United States. So we want to go to natural yarns because those are the kind of yarns that can be produced within the United States currently. And while the cost of US produced yarns are generally higher initially, the price on those shouldn't go up because of the cost of tariffs. So you're not actually paying tariffs because they're already US based yarns. Another option is to look for buying yarn that has already been purchased. And so we're sort of rebuying it. And there are yarns that are being sold on Facebook Marketplace, in Facebook yarn groups. There are Ravelry places that you can buy yarn. There are Reddit groups that you can buy yarn. So look for yarns that are being resold after somebody has already purchased them. There are tons and tons of inventory out there for places you can buy yarn that has already been purchased, and so you're not going to be paying those tariffs on those yarns. In addition, you can shop thrift stores and find some yarn at those kind of places as well. Thrift stores, yard sales, all of those kind of good things. The next thing we want to look at doing and talking about is frogging projects. Okay, I know that you've got a ton of whips right now sitting around collecting dust because you've just no longer inspired to work on that specific project, but the yarn is still perfectly good to use. So now's a great time to frog some of those projects and repurpose that yarn into something that you are more passionate and happier about. You can even frog the projects that are hanging up in your closet or in the cupboard that you just aren't using or you're not in love with anymore. You know, those blankets, the stash of blankets that you have, you're just like, yeah, they don't match my decor. Whatever the case may be. Frog some of those and you now have a whole new stash of yarn that you can make some amazing new projects that are exciting to you. So those are some options. In addition, there are a lot of videos and different things that teach you, tutorials that teach you how to frog things that you have purchased from like Goodwill. And this might be blankets, it might be garments that were handmade, but it might also be garments that were store-bought but using a higher quality yarn. Now, I have not gone down that road, so I don't know how hard it is, but there are definitely some tutorials out there that teach you how to do it. So, if that's something that's interesting to you, make sure you check that out. There are also things called yarn swaps, and whether this is something that you put together or you find some in your area, local area, this is a way where people get together and they bring the yarn that they no longer are excited about, and then they kind of swap it with one another. So there's different things that you can find that give you rules and structures on how to do this. And that way everybody gets some new yarn, or at least new to them, and that, you know, is kind of fun and exciting to really take advantage of. And finally, I know y'all have a stash. So now is a great time to start some of those stash busting things. Like shop your stash instead of shopping the stores. If you really want to save some money, this is your best alternative. And it's a great way to kind of stash bust some different things. So take advantage of that. It's a great opportunity. So, yeah, tariffs are annoying, but it certainly gives us an opportunity to experiment and be creative, find new ways to use the yarn in our stash, or discover new fiber types and support some local businesses and do all of that great things. So at the end of the day, we have what we need to continue our crochet craft without going broke and without really being dramatically affected by the tariffs if we don't need to be. I would love to get your ideas. Where are you going to be buying from? Are you going to be just working from your stash for the time being? What are your plans? Or maybe you're not going to change anything and you're going to continue to buy as is. That's totally okay too. I'd love to hear what your tips and suggestions on minimizing, avoiding, or just enjoying and continue to appreciate the craft. Let me know in the comments below, and if there are any updates that I can share with you on specific yarn companies or whatever the case may be, I will certainly bring those to you each week in my Yarny News segment on the weekly vlog. And of course, if there's any big news, I'll bring that in a separate video as well. Thank you so much, and hey Farah, frog us out of here.